All right, hello and welcome. My name is Freeman Michaels. I am not running for Congress, but I am helping Danielle St John run for Congress. And
I'm Justin Stewart. On that note, I am not running for Congress, and I'm helping Danielle St. John run for Congress in California's 49th Congressional District.
and we thought it would be a good idea just to talk about guns. And Justin and I vary on our view on guns a little bit, and we thought it'd be good just to have not a debate, but maybe a discussion and a dive about maybe how we can learn a little bit more about each other's differences, because this is a pretty divisive issue coming up, and I feel like maybe progressives, which both of us aren't taking the issue as seriously, and that's going to be the side that I'm arguing today. So it's more or less the conservative side. I am not a fan of the NRA. I'm not a fan of guns. I own one gun, but I think that this issue goes a little bit deeper. And with that, did you want to start us off?
Um, so I'm going to start off with the news of Mr. Clark, Stephen Clark. We were talking about this earlier, and I think it's only fitting that we dedicate a portion of tonight's broadcast to his life and memory.
Do you want to tell a little bit about that story, just in case people don't know the name?
So, you guys, I don't know if you've been following current events. He's the young 22-year-old that was killed in his backyard in Sacramento, California. Shot 20 times. 8 of those shots were in the back. There's no telling which one of the rounds killed him, and it's assumed that he lived for 3 to 10 minutes after the first bullet pierced his body. Father of 2. He has a fiance. They were planning a wedding. His grandmother is who he lived with. Probably spent her entire life raising him from a little boy. I don't know the specifics of his home life, but if I had to imagine, she probably had him most of his life, and if not, she played a prominent role in his upbringing. And I am willing to bet that upon his 18th birthday, she shouted with joy that she had brought him to see 18 years old as a black guy in America, only to have him shot down and killed at 22 at the hands of a police officer. We've been here before. We know how this episode is going to play out. But I will ask that we don't allow ourselves to become desensitized to it. When I arrived this afternoon, me and Freeman, we spoke a little bit about it, and I asked him how did he feel about it. And would you say that you still have the wow factor?
No.
Not the wow factor?
No, and I think what I brought up to you is that there's so much crap in the world that if you want to affect change, at some point you have to separate yourself out and start looking at the problems.
Yeah.
And to your point, you're like, but we also can't let it go. And to me, like, I bring up the same with homelessness, because when I was younger, that was a big thing. We're like, oh my God, what are we going to do about this? Homelessness is getting worse. And now it's way worse. We just walk a block away, as you know, and it's not even really being addressed because we have so many bigger issues, which are now also similarly not being addressed, like war. Like, we've been at war for 16 years. And so for me, it's kind of it's like I'm not desensitized, but I'm also not absorbing each one, because I feel like we would all be a mess, as many of us already are.
Right. And I understand that, because no matter how it's portrayed or it's talked about, no matter how somebody try to get you to understand, I think it's one of those things that if you don't experience it, you'll never really come to understand the impact of it.
I can't imagine the psychological impact.
The
I think is the biggest
impact of it. Where now it's to the point of having watched this episode play out over and over and over and over again. I remember when it first came to my psyche, and I could no longer engage in the ostrich act. I couldn't bury my head under the sand.
Yeah.
I was scared. I was so terrified. I didn't know what to do. The thought of
Is that like, did it like personalize it? You're like, oh wait,
yeah,
that's me.
Yeah, that's me, and I'm like, oh boy, now I'm respectable and all that good stuff, but suppose I'm drunk or something. I mean, you know how your mind is, and everything
Yeah.
plays out. But when I learned of Mr. Clark's death, it was more of a may he rest in peace, or modernize it, hashtag Stefan Clark.
Right.
Because I think at this point in time, and if you're watching this and you're a black man in America, I want you to tune in too, because I'm very interested to know how you guys feel about this. But it feels as if you're now waiting to live, or you're waiting to die, or you're just waiting for an absolution that just might not come. It's not that big of a deal anymore. It's almost inevitable. I mean, you're going to die at some point. If it's at the hand of a police officer, I guess the Christian folks will say, well, it's God's will, and we move on, put you in the ground, and life goes on, honor you, try to memorialize your life. And the generations that are to come picks up the baton and go forward. If that makes any sense to anybody. But there's nothing to stop this, because they get away with it. And I don't want
every time it seems.
I don't want to generalize them as a whole, because I don't believe it's all of them. Most of them.
Them being police.
Yeah, most police officers spend their entire careers without even firing a shot, firing their service weapons without being on the range. But those that hold that grievance, I think those police officers. Excuse me, there I go again. The police officers that do hold that grievance against, and it's not any one particular race, it's that void inside that they're trying
It's
to
like
fill.
a need to dominate.
Yeah, it's that need to dominate,
Yeah.
and they know they have that
Yeah.
power. And so they just exert it. And in the process of it, and I'm going to use a language I don't normally use, but in the process of exerting that dominance over another grown man, I'm sure they're thinking something along the lines of, nigga, give me a reason to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure. I mean,
I think they probably even said that much in some camp. Yeah, like, give me a reason to.
Right, and if you watch the videos of Sterling down in Baton Rouge, and some of the other ones, you'll actually hear them say. Now they don't use that specific term, but you'll hear them say, "I'll blow your," as if it's a joy to do it. Versus in a lot of instances where you see police officers pulling their service weapons, you hear them moanly saying, trying to de-escalate the situation. And you see examples of this. Mainly the victim's white. And they're like, hey, buddy, man, you don't want to do this. Stop. Hey, talk to me, reason with me, think about such and such, call in all that back up. It took Tamir Rice 3 seconds from the time that car pulled up for him to die.
Yeah.
So when you zoom out of the smaller picture of this dead body and you start looking at the environment around it, eventually you have to stop fearing. I mean, what would you do if you lived your life in fear, right? I mean,
I guess other people would have to tell me that's not something that I.
I guess you. And I don't. No, I'm not going there. Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet. You try to come to reason with it. And like I say, you try to find an absolution, and I guess in the subconscious way, you still hope against hope that someone like you come along and affect change, because I think the black voice has effectively been silenced. And while I don't want to get political, if when you can point to them and say, oh, they're hobby horses for the Democrats, we don't got to pay them no mind.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
And I've noticed that you were there at the last public meeting that I went to with the police there, and there were a lot of people in the audience as I was done with my speech. They looked at me and said, "Thank you for speaking for us," and they of course were being people with darker skin, because it's like and even when I just showed up, they're like, great, a potential white ally. And it's like I could feel that it's like you said, the black voice has been lost, and they're waiting for an ally to stand up and say what they've been saying the whole time.
Right. A friend of mine and I got into it once over this, but I was telling him that it can only effectively be done through the white ally. Um, and you can go to any example in history of a successful movement. It was always with the pure-hearted within the oppressors.
Yeah, you had to get the
oppressor.
oppressors on board.
It was only you had to peel off enough of the pure-hearted to form the coalition.
Yes.
And so when Black Lives Matter sprang up, and I think they sprang up with legitimate concerns. I support them 100%. I still do. They said they had allies from all over who said, I agree. Black Lives Matter. Let's give these guys funding.
Mm-hmm.
Let's help these guys out. And then from there, the discreditation started. They're Soros stooges.
Well, and I feel like the funding, in some way,
we need you
to ruined the purity of the movement.
Because now we need your rallies and speeches to incorporate X, Y, Z, and then here's your 10, 15, 20 grand, whatever the case may be. So with that being said, it's easy for the opposition to tell the independent, the moderate, don't pay them no mind. Just look who they got on their side. And he's up to no good. And by the way, automation's on the way. Or it's already here. I guess who's going to get the little jobs that left? You better not go down that route if you know what's best for you. So there's so many tools and intimidation that they have at their disposal. That there's no any one that they can go to squash the rebellion, so to say. So yeah, it's required that you have allies who have not only who can make up the number, but who have the resources that will sustain one that will build the foundation that could sustain a movement that will grow. I won't even say believe, because history has proven time and time and time again that if the foundation is built there is a leader and a leader emerge, the numbers will come to follow him, because
people are looking for something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, Dr. King said it best, you're right? The fierce urgency of now. And so with Mr. Hogg and the survivor and the Parkland survivors, I'm sure they have no idea what on earth they're doing. I'm sure they didn't wake up one morning and say, it'll be a fine.
We're going to lead a movement.
To go lead a movement.
Yeah.
I'm positive. So when you hear people criticize them, you have to think about this. One, it's on-the-job training. I mean, because
in the worst way.
In the worst way.
Right in the public view, and they're young.
It makes you think of a situation where you have an escaped slave, right, has a swamp before him full of alligators, then the slave patroller and the hounds behind him. Which one is it?
You got to go gator.
What else do you have to lose? You know what happens if they get you.
Yeah.
But there's just a mighty chance that you might, survive your way through. So I say that to make the point. People will come join you if you seize the moment.
Yeah.
The moment. And I know a lot of people are going to inbox me. Well, you're. I believe there's a place for. Well, I know there's a place for me in the movement, but it's not at the helm. It's not at the helm. I don't have the experience that's required to seriously go about this. Like, I'm a hothead, right? After a while.
Sometimes movements need that,
right,
and you need the people behind them to keep the hothead in control. I mean, I don't want to bring up Trump's name, but Trump.
Absolutely, but I think, once again, I know. But I also think that out there somewhere is that leader. And he's a kid. Woman, black, white, gay, straight, rich, poor, it doesn't matter. Because it's never about the messenger, it's always the message.
Right.
And with that being said, we all here send our sympathies, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Danielle St John campaign. We send our sympathies up to Sacramento, to the Clark family. I know Freeman has expressed it as well. And even being a black man, I can't imagine, having to experience that. Having to bury your child, or his brother came under fire for his emotional responses in the wake of his brother's death, and I can understand. Like I said, he's the sane one, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that I'm just sitting here so calm in this high rise downtown San Diego, like there's just nothing going on. It's just batshit crazy.
It's weird. Yeah, I mean, and like there's a block and a half away. There's people that are sleeping in the park
Broadcast interrupted? Sorry.
from everywhere, or is it just interrupted on?
I just got interrupted on Facebook. It could have just been me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I forgot my point.
Well, that's all. The broadcast was interrupted. Yeah, you're saying it's weird to be here and be calm.
Oh, yeah, to be so
while other
calm.
human beings literally just
Right.
are going through the most tragic thing ever.
And that's just what we know about, right? We're speaking about a specific case that we know about. Imagine all of the situations that we don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
Those that just take this abuse in silence. that
Yeah,
suffer
or
in
or
silence.
even those that speak up and get beat down
And
for
beat
it.
down.
It's like now we even have body cam footage and camera footage, and it's still not changing.
And what and this is the part that bothers me.
But we're talking about gun control, but we'll get there eventually.
Right. Where you have so many situations that are interlinked, whether it's police brutality, whether it's these mass shootings in schools, domestic violence, so on and so forth, where if those particular segments would join forces
Mhm.
and attack just their particular problem at the root cause, they'll all link up down the road.
Yeah, because the particular route is
The particular route.
Yeah.
And then down the road, they'll link up and they'll say, hey, I remember you, you SOB. We was arguing over there. Well, look at what you're doing. Oh, I see what you're doing here now.
Yeah.
And then you go about your damn job, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Don't think I did a gun thing. I didn't do that. Whatever the case may be, that we go about, affecting change. Because we're all headed in the same direction. We're just taking different routes, right? And we'll get there. I have no doubt about that. It's just the time that it's going to take. Man, this is a drain. Like you mentioned earlier, the psychological aspect of this. It is something draining.
Well, I don't feel like this is, again, we're going to get to gun control, but there's a certain stress level that it's like I was aware of in a very minor way. It was like I had financial worries throughout my life, and that was kind of my stress level that was keeping me working. But women have this stress level where it's kind of like a hypervigilance that they have to engage in out and about their day, because men are kind of the predators, and you just kind of have to be. It's like walk him in my car. Like they always have to be worried about that. And similarly, people with darker skin have to have. I'm not going to say it's a hypervigilance because I don't know what it is, but there is a certain stress that's always running. It's always wondering, and that's I think the part of the psychological aspect you're talking about, and that just has to be beyond draining.
The last point I'm gonna make. I remember growing up, we lived in rural South Carolina, and you think of that, and if you think of racism, you would think, oh, it was terrible down there. But down there, our only interaction with police officers was when we saw them driving by. We'd wave at them, because we were led to believe that they were the good guys. So I grew up with believing that you respect the law, obey the law, follow the law. They're going to leave you alone. When I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and it would mainly be with my friends, but I would see that that's not the case. And in the process, it's only natural to want to defend those you consider of your tribe, because we're tribal at heart, right?
Oh yeah. Well,
So
and certainly if we're forced to feel like we're part of different tribes, you're
Okay.
going to be like, all right, well, I'm going to stick with this tribe.
Right. Which then just makes bad situations even worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that being said, and you could even tie it into the gun debate, right?
I was going to say, I feel like you're making my point with the gun debate, but we'll get there.
Right. So yes. So my heart's heavy for the Clark family, but and not just that particular family, right? Because we were talking about today, but it even hurts for little Tamir Rice's mom, right? You know, whenever I think of some nights I can't sleep thinking about her standing on those city hall steps up there in Cleveland, lost, just plumb lost.
And everyone who sees that and then is going to say, okay, that's the world. That's what the world thinks of me. Like if you identify with that person as, oh, that's a me, that's someone like me, that's what the world thinks of me. And I think that goes to the psychological aspect of it. It's just, yeah, I can't imagine. I obviously.
Heartbroken. But yeah, so with that being said,
so the prelude to the guns.
Right. Chapter 1.
So I guess I'll start then. I feel like there is a general push to ban the AR-15, and that's what's known as common sense gun reform. And I'm not a fan of the NRA at all. I don't know anything about them really other than the fact that they are most likely on the wrong end of a lot of funding and that they have a questionable past. But beyond that, for me, the debate really needs to extend beyond laws, and it needs to extend beyond the Constitution, and you need to start with what is basic human rights. And I feel like that's where conservatives are at, and that's where progressives are not, because progressives say the government is going to protect us, we have this Constitution that's going to protect our rights, and we even have this saying healthcare is a right that comes from government. And conservatives don't have that mentality. They are more of, you have to secure your own rights. And part of that for them, it's not that the AR-15 is that special, it's that if the government makes a point of taking away the AR-15 now, that almost invalidates the Constitution, because now it's just a piece of paper. What's going to stop them from taking the next gun that's close to an AR-15? So that's the conservative take.
So that's a great argument. So this is the problem with that, right? When the government says that the convicted felon who's more than likely black can't have a gun, the conservatives make no rebuttal.
Yeah.
when they say a person who's in their past has a misdemeanor assault, and let's say it's an assault on a female charge, and now no disrespect women, but there are a large number of cases where to get back at this guy, this woman called the police and say, he hit me and he didn't, all he did was slept with some other girl. Mm-hmm. And now when the government said that he can't have a gun, the conservatives have nothing to say.
Oh, and there was also a weird thing. I feel like this was like a decade ago, but there were some black people that showed up and they matched identically word for word what the NRA was saying. They're like, we need to protect guns and And they're like, hey, so that means us? And there was like this weird silence when they're like, literally, yeah, we just matched exactly. And I don't remember how that worked out, but there's no doubt in my mind that there's hypocrisy implementing the law.
So when they say that, and one of the talking points is, well, they should enforce existing gun law. It makes a DA and a police officer, a detective, it makes their day to catch a convicted felon with a gun.
Probably, because it's an easy one.
It makes their day.
It's like, oh, it's an easy slam dunk. And I bet if they have darker skin, you're like, well, racist or not, that's an easier conviction statistically.
So when they say you can't enforce these laws, that's complete BS. So who's and you gotta get, you know the old saying, you have to either learn history or you're bound to repeat it. And in no way am I advocating repeal Second Amendment. I don't think anyone in good conscience is saying repeal the Second Amendment. Now, I'll say this. If, because you have to negotiate with conservative Democrats and Republicans, I would come to the negotiating table with a complete bill of the repeal of the Second Amendment. I would. Not that I would get the complete repeal.
Yeah, I think.
But to force them somewhere, because if they don't come to the table now, and this is left to Foster, when the actual language is wrote, they'll be nowhere in sight.
Yeah.
And history is, it took 100 years from 1860s, from the 1860s into the 1960s for any type of anti-lynching legislation to get passed because of the Republican filibuster, the Southern filibuster in the Senate.
Yeah.
They were Democrats at the time. Strom Thurmond, John Stennis, Wilbur Mills in the House, the Rule Committee chair. For 100 years, they filibustered it. And what they did was, when the final language was wrote, they made themselves irrelevant. So they could have had the gradual implementation that they wanted, but because they were hardliners, they just obscured themselves into irrelevancy. So yeah, I would start with the complete repeal.
Wow. Yeah, so so I would definitely disagree with that one. And I feel like if your society, I have trouble telling people what they should do. I feel like people generally can reflect back what they feel is necessary. And if people felt safer in society, they would have less of a demand for guns. And that because our society is so messed up and divided, and I think that's not anything new. It's not been that long since women have been voting. It's not been that long since black people have had equal rights. There's a long-term concern that a lot of these problems surface because of a lack of a middle class and because the people are fighting. And guns is one manifestation of that. And if you can get people fighting over something, then the two parties don't have to work together. And there's a obvious lack of interest on both parties to get anything done. Like, you would think the Democrats would have been in full panic mode in 2016 and then all of a sudden get a great healthcare bill together or work with the Republicans or get anything done. And they didn't get anything done. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing around gun laws.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
When you say they didn't get anything done, what do you mean?
For me, it's like I see healthcare deteriorate for the last 40 years, and I want to see a major correction. And I know, like, I got a bunch of notifications on my watch every time Scott Peters voted, and you see this stuff, I'm like, you don't know what half of this stuff is, and I bet most of it's not going to make anyone's life better.
Gotcha.
And I would like to see, like, if someone actually wanted to make our lives better, like Paul Ryan has obvious amount of influence and Nancy Pelosi have an obvious amount of influence. If they wanted to affect change, they could go and hold a free town hall and talk to the community and organize and say, what do you guys want? Okay, I'm not going to give you money, but I will be a central point of focus and you guys can work on what you want. Like, they could do all of this and make our lives better, but they don't. And if they're not doing that simple free stuff to make things better, I really wonder long term about giving that institution more power. In other words, taking guns that I don't particularly care about, but taking those guns away for no good reason. Like the AR-15, I mean, we have a good reason to address guns now, but there's no good reason that I've seen to take the AR-15 as opposed to some other guns. And especially when the people have shown, like Nancy Pelosi and Paul Ryan, they could make our lives better, but they choose not to. So they could improve the middle class, but they're either too stupid or corrupt or incompetent. And for me, giving that institution, an institution that's had us at war, an institution that shoots people, and it's like giving that institution more long-term power terrifies me. And we have to do something about guns immediately, but this solution of common sense gun control that takes an odd step about the AR-15, I'm not sure that that's the right one.
The AR-15. Would you be okay with somebody having a tank?
No.
Would you be okay with someone having a fighter jet?
No.
What about a Predator drone?
I hope not. Well, you're talking about an unarmed, because there's the Amazon.
An armed Predator drone.
No, because Jeff Bezos sells drones called Predator anyway.
And why would you not be okay with that?
I think that the line, and it's an arbitrary line, that's why I said I don't care about the AR-15. It's more of the arbitrary line that I call them ammosexuals, and I say that lovingly, that the ammosexuals on, they're just like, no, the
Ryan,
AR-15
that's
is...
you.
No, I have ammosexual friends too. They're all great people. And if the world goes to hell, where am I going? I'm going to one of their places.
Tell them, Travis, you're one.
Oh, where was I going with that? Oh, so where do you draw the line? That is the big distinction. I think the intent was that it's to form a militia. But even then, to me, I go beyond the Constitution and I say, what do the human beings of this land want? And the government, to me, is subservient to the human beings. And the government is only limited by the Constitution. And it's only because that Second Amendment is getting threatened, unless you do it, legitly. If you threaten it willy-nilly and say, well, the AR-15 just matches some little legalese BS and we're going to take it away, but another weapon just like the AR-15 is still there, that's a weird step to take, and that has legal and structural implications for the government. And it's the same government, like I said, that is, in my opinion, intentionally not solving the problems of the middle class and intentionally keeping people divided, intentionally not solving problems. I mean, it's like you just run down the list of things. It's like they're just not doing a good job. And it's not that the people inside the government are awful or bad or anything like that. It's the institutions and the processes behind them, I think, that are going to always yield this result. And we saw the same thing at that community boardroom, the way that democracy works there. So I think there's a systemic problem with it. And that's why I have a problem in mass giving that amount of power away with the AR-15, even though I wouldn't even know what the AR-15 is, and it's not relevant to me.
Right.
So no tanks, no drones.
I'm all for someone's right. I mean, I grew up in South Carolina. All right, it's a rite of passage. I mean, you're born with a gun in your hand.
I've never been.
My dad would go to work. He would leave at 2:30. To go to work. 3 o'clock when I got off the bus, I'd have a pocket full of shells and I'm headed to the woods because I got less than 2 hours from my mom's home at 5. So I got to get my rounds in.
I didn't know you shot.
Oh, you got skeet shooting? Yeah.
Okay.
Man, I was. Yeah, I used to get it in when it came to the guns. But I know that an AR-15 that serves one purpose, and it's not to defend your home. I don't know many people that go and hunt and eat bullet-riddled carcasses. The chance of somebody breaking into your home, in the grand scheme of things, and I'm not saying people don't do it, but the chances of someone breaking into your home and you using that gun in defense of your home, your property, successfully, is pretty slim.
Well, there's really no reason why you would need it, and I think that's an argument a lot of progressives make. Like, why do you need it?
So this is there is no need for an assault weapon outside of the military. And if in some sort of compromise, and of course I'm always looking for a consensus.
Yeah.
Where people willingly surrender their assault weapons to an armory, or some sort of nature.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying take it. That's not really what I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
That's not. But what I'm saying is
make it less accessible so kids aren't using it.
Right. There must, if we're going to do anything, and what we can't do is continue this policy of death is okay. We got to stop that. We got to get out of that. And while we might not have the solutions now, we got to stop dithering, because that's saying death is okay. Not
Right.
making a choice.
Yeah,
is
you're
making a
just
choice.
like, all right, well, we're just waiting.
So if it means more funding for mental health, if it means more funding for education, if it means smaller classroom sizes where the teacher can, give a few more minutes per pupil.
Yeah.
I'm willing to say 10 years, ban them. In 10 years ago, we get them back. In fact, but don't let that be the line in the sand that you just. I mean, come on.
Well, here's the again, and the AR-15 is not special to me, and an ammo section will have to argue why this one's special. But what I do hear them say, and I think is a legit argument, is that if you ban the AR-15, there is a very similar weapon, easily attainable. Let's assume you even got them all out. I don't think that's even feasible. But let's say you got them all out. There's just as much next stuff available that maybe the round doesn't do as much damage. It's not going to go through an armor-piercing thing, but it's still too much, and we're still not addressing the problem. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a school shooting. They're like, all right, well, we're going to have to ban this next gun. And I think that's even David Hogg himself said, if they give us an inch, we're going to take a mile. And if you are a conservative, clinging to your guns because you're afraid of the government, and honestly at this point I don't quite blame them, hearing that from the leader of the other movement, whether or not he's the leader or not, but the figurehead is terrifying.
Well, okay, so let's go back to the conservatives that are afraid of what? Government coming and take their guns?
No, they're afraid that government isn't who they say they are,
Gotcha.
and that they're not on our side.
Great. So, in every fashion of their disgusting pathetic lives, they're hypocrites. They collect their government Social Security checks. They ride on government-maintained streets.
I'm not going to defend conservatives that way.
They're hypocrites in every aspect of their life. I mean,
Danielle St. John
come on.
campaign
I
Okay,
disagree.
This is,
I think conservatives
this is not
have a.
Danielle St. John. This is her.
This is Justin
me.
Stewart.
It's after 6 o'clock. You know?
No, I actually think conservatives have a valid, and I would even call it a beautiful perspective. I wrote an
They
article
have some great points.
about I think it was the beautiful people I saw at a Trump rally, and that was I don't know, whatever, a couple years ago that I wrote that. And I am not one, but I understand them now, and I think it's too easy to judge people by the extreme amongst them. So when we see conservative politicians or we see the people speaking up, we're like, man, you're crazy, because they are hypocritical. But I feel like that's on both sides. Like you, I'm sure, have experienced some hypocrisy with the Hillary camp folks.
Oh, mercy. Yes.
So I feel like there are a shitload of good, normal conservative people that you wouldn't even really think are conservative, but it's like you work with them, you see them, and if your back is against the wall, they're going to vote for capitalism over government, but they would still like something better than what we have.
And that's why, audience, you don't hear this type of language from me all the time, because I understand that sometimes you're going to have to smile and grin at them and you can't stand nothing about them. So that's why you don't usually hear me this off the cuff as often. But you're right, because those are the ones that you want to work with, right? Those are the ones that you want to say, well, okay, we'll give you the spending, the money for mental health. We'll give you the money for legislation. But you also got to get enough support from the left, which is going to have to include some type of gun control language.
Yeah, I feel like
to get a final bill, out of the conference.
Well, here's my thought on that. It's like, if we're going to ban a gun or limit a gun, I'm all for background checks and make that solid.
Right.
Like the fact that that's not legit and standard is absurd. It just shows how incompetent
Well, it's
all
sort
that
of
stuff.
like minimum wage, right? It's just one of the absurdities.
There's a lot of absurd. But I feel like that if you take away this gun, you still don't have a good reason for this gun and not the next gun. Or if you take away this gun, what's to prevent someone from 3D printing, because these things are getting good now, a gun that does similar damage? Or what's to prevent someone from snapping and using chemicals? Or it's like if you have nothing to lose, I'm sure you can find a way on the internet to kill a large number of people in a catastrophic way and become famous. And the AR-15 is just kind of famous at this point. And I feel like if we just address this gun issue, which is going to have major constitutional ramifications in the eyes of conservatives, and you don't have to believe it, you just have to accept that in the eyes of conservatives, they're like, oh my God, if you do this, then there's no stability in our union. And that's honestly where they go. So you have to, if you're going to take this major step of banning the AR-15, you have to know exactly what you're talking about and exactly why this is going to solve the problem. And I feel like the source of the problem is the lack of a middle class, the lack of these available services, that people are just working all day. It's like month to month, paycheck to paycheck. You're only you're worried about retirement. You're not even thinking about retirement, and how sometimes you're just hoping your car doesn't break down. It's like people don't have the time to focus on their family life and the stuff that needs to happen. And I think that's where the source of all this problem goes.
No, I absolutely agree. So I would say this. You go and hypothesize about those hypotheticals, and when you figure out, you come let us know. But as it stands right now, people with access to AR-15s in particular, but military-style assault weapons, are using this privilege, this right, to go mow down 20, 30, 50 people at a time. And, if a person can do that with acid, knife, and, a box of nails within a few seconds, that's fine. And tell us about the hypothetical. But as it stands now, they're not using acid. No. They're not using knives. They're using the assault weapons.
The AR-15, right. And I think that's one of those things where it's the easiest and it's the most popular. And one of the things, like I went to a young conservatives it was a Duncan Hunter gun shooting and dinner club or something. Anyway, so I got to meet Duncan Hunter, and he told me all about his work with the media. Anyway, but the amosexuals will tell you about their guns, and I went down the line and I fired a lot of these guys' guns, and they talked about the different laws that I remember California passing. They're like, remember this? And we called it the bullet law. I'm like, why'd you call it that? Because there was some key, like you couldn't have an extra magazine, and you had to have not the key attached to the gun. But what they did is they just used a bullet to stick the bullet in and then the key thing. But the Democrats use this as a like victory. They're like, look what we did. You know, people can't have this magazine and reload it quickly. And conservatives are like, this is all crap. Or not conservatives, amosexuals. They're like, this is all crap. These laws aren't doing anything. And I feel like the AR-15 is the same thing. So if you get rid of the AR-15, there's going to be something else. Like the AR-15 is 15 rounds. My handgun is 7. It's like, isn't one handgun taking out 5 or 6 kids enough where we should say, okay, stop, what's the problem? It's like we shouldn't have to wait till it gets to the AR-15 or what's next after the AR-15, because I guarantee you, once you get rid of the AR-15, kids are still stressed out, they're still snapped, they're still on too many drugs, their parents are still working too hard, we're probably going to still be at war, and I feel like kids are still going to act out in some way. It just won't be with an AR-15, assuming you've cleaned them all out, and I still don't know how that's pragmatically going to happen.
So my far left friends, well, my establishment left friends are going to be a little disappointed because I agree with you there. But I'll say this: it goes back to the point when they start using these handguns. So this is what bothers me about the whole AR-15 aspect of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's saying, well, when someone go into a school and shoot children, that incident takes precedent over a 4-year-old shooting his sister in the back. That takes precedent over the police shooting black people.
Yeah.
That takes precedent over the everyday gun crimes of our gun culture that take place.
Yeah.
I mean,
because our schools are supposed to be that
Right.
sanctuary.
Right. So,
Should be.
and it's something. I'm like I said, I'm in a I'm the exception, and I'm just going to go ahead and accept it, you guys. I am the exception to the rule, but I think that I don't know. Guns. It's the gun culture. It's not the gun itself. It's some people don't have access.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Some people who shouldn't have access to these guns, and most of the time it's some underage kid who uses the parent's gun because the gun is liberally stored in the house.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot. I mean, that's what we at the League of Women Voters dinner we went or lunch the other day they were talking about. That's
Right.
basically all that. It's like even if you think you've hidden the gun, it's not.
Right, because my father's guns was on a rack in his house. And as soon as you walk into the house, the back door, you see his gun rack sitting right there. My grandfather's was underneath his bed, and then he had a rack on the side of his wardrobe. You know, the old folks had the old dressers, the wardrobes. Yeah. He had a gun rack that was on the side of it. So the guns were always accessible, but we knew better. And I'm not the one injecting race into this guy, so don't call me the racist. But I've been seeing a lot of posts on Facebook where they say, well, you don't see black people going into the... But we knew better than to handle those guns in a manner that could possibly indicate that you had touched that gun. I don't know if y'all know my father, but he used to cut ass, and boy, I didn't want my body cut. I couldn't imagine something happening with that gun, and
Right.
I having to bear the responsibilities for that. So that kind of took that, the heavy sense of the gun culture.
Yeah.
It made a fine line for us.
Yeah.
But we were influenced. I was influenced under the gun culture. My video Grand Theft Auto when San Andreas came out, I almost lost my mind. Call of Duty, man. I remember the first one that I really got into was Finest Hour, where we were at Pearl Harbor. I got the 50 cal. The first time I had access. Now, mind you, this is pre modern warfare, World War II. So this is you don't have the stimulations and all that good stuff. But at the time, it was hot shit. You get the 50 cal, you just shoot, you die, motherfucker. Everything you could ever think of.
Aggression can be fun.
Right.
I don't. I play dodgeball, so I don't.
And it never entered my mind to go take a gun and mow down people.
No.
So the issue is not really the gun itself. It goes back. You have to look at where is this problem mainly happening, and it's happening with those who have that nothing to lose factor, those who've been marginalized their entire lives to the point. Now, with that being said, to get that funding, there has to be some type of gun control language, and that's just the reality of the matter. If you're one of those people that don't, then continue to hoot and holler in your little irrelevant echo chambers. Fine, I'm fine with that. But if you want to effectively get something done about gun control in America, with 150 something plus million 150 something plus million members of the voting population, to get something done about guns, there's going to be some sort of gun control language. That's the only way I can see somebody like Jackie Spears coming on board.
Mm-hmm. What I'd like to see, and because I have friends that are teachers, and I talk with them, like, Freeman, I'm terrified. I was like, yeah, it's like you should be. It's like anyway, that's like he's actually known kids that have snapped and threatened people. Jeez. And I think that it's like we have to do something about the school shootings now. That cannot be dismissed, because that's a short-term problem. Kids are dying and people are afraid. Like right now, that has to be done. And that solution, I think, needs to consider the long-term problems. And I think we both agree that resolving the middle class issue is ideal. It's like because you wouldn't even have to approach this subject if people had enough time to spend with their kids, and were doing, and they had access to all this stuff.
If they had, the opportunity to sustain themselves and still,
right.
And
it's funny because it's like it's only now that we're faced with this short-term problem of safety and long-term concern of guns that people start fighting. And I think you'll find that conservatives and progressives would agree on a lot of stuff because you work with each other and you go to school with each other, and it's only when your back is against the wall and you're forced to choose between, someone like a Hillary Clinton and a Trump, and you're like, well, maybe there are more options. And I feel like kind of with this issue, we're forced to choose between, the NRA and, in my opinion, the corrupt Democrats. And I'm like, well, man, there's got to be something better than those two.
Team Hog over here, y'all. I'm Team Hog.
Anyway, that's probably a good place to leave it. Those 47 minutes.
Oh, great. So yes, guys. Like I say, if you want to effectively get change done in America on guns, on human lives, and this is the great thing about it, all right? Because if we do it right, it's a one size fit all.
It should be a win-win for everybody.
It's a win-win
not necessarily the government, people who want power over others, but
establishment,
for the people.
you're screwed. Yeah, you're screwed.
But for the people, it should be. There's no reason why it shouldn't be a win-win.
For the 99%, it's a win-win, and I don't care what your first issue is. If democracy is not your second, then none of it matters. Right. And one of the reasons why people don't have no faith in government, that they have, yourself included, is because democracy, it's not people's main priority.
No, they're fighting for their lives.
They're like, oh well, I'm Black Lives Matter. I don't give a fuck about you because you're not American. I'm like, well, if your Black Lives Matters, well, then in order to get Black Lives Matter on the forefront, you have to care about the All Life Matter person. Now, not saying he's right, but you got to understand you and him have to work together to get something. And Life Matter, that's a good compromise.
Yeah.
You know what Life Matter says to me? It says no more shit killing of damn police officers. We're going to fund mental health people so that we don't just lock them up. We're going to make sure education is adequately funded so that when these children leave high school, they're not out there tossed into the world high and dry. Yeah. That's what that compromise means to me. Yeah. And I'm going to make this last point and then I'm going to shut up, because once I get started talking, I'm too lazy to stop. Compromise is not bad, you guys. If you live in the real world, you compromise every day, and you understand what I'm saying. Compromise is not bad. When you want to go somewhere, but you don't really got the gas, or you have to kind of slow down and wait until you get paid again, you have the gas, you just compromise. When you want ice cream, but you really got to get a bag of rice for dinner, so you end up getting the bag. That's
you eat ice cream for dinner?
I mean, you can have the ice cream, but then you're not going to.
I did it for a while.
Once you digest that, then
it doesn't work out.
You're going to be hungry again. But compromise is not bad, guys. Meeting somebody in the middle is not a bad thing. It's not a bad. Like we have fun doing it, right?
Yeah, no, we argue all day and
right. Like he says some things, I'm like, oh my god. And then I say some things, he's like, yeah, whatever. And then we find the common denominator, and then we come up with something beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
The barbecues and all that
Absolutely,
stuff.
that's
Like
gonna be
we
so
come
much
up with
fun.
some great stuff.
It'll be so much fun. All right. With that, thank you. We'll be doing more of these. If you want to follow us on the humanitarises.info website, there is a YouTube icon, and click that and just subscribe to our
The day is over, guys.
YouTube channel.
Come
And
on,
Justin's on Facebook, Justin J. Stewart IV, and I am Freeman Michaels. That's Public
Twitter.
Freeman.
I'm on Twitter as well. ATW_JJS13. You can at me on Twitter. Follow me.
What? Why did you choose that?
So I was I think I was running for city council at the time, right? So the acronym is All the Way with Justin J was the slogan.
Oh my God.
And well, I got it from LBJ's campaign. All the way with
He
LBJ.
didn't have a Twitter handle. All right, we're out.
Right.
We're out.
I guess that's why he won and I didn't.